Welcome to the TELUS Originals DocTalks, a series of talks dedicated to craft, themes, and ideas behind TELUS Originals documentaries with the people behind and in front of the camera. I'm your host, Sabrina Rani Furminger, and for this episode, we'll be talking to Kirk Thomas and Jeremy Schaulin-Rioux about Handle with Care, the legend of the Nautic Streetball crew. Driven by a quest to finish the final installment of their legendary mixtapes, Handle with Care, the legend of the Nautic Streetball crew pits issues of race and rejection against themes of self-expression and brotherhood. With a thriving local and global legacy, this underdog journey charts how a group of outcasts who never made the NBA changed the game forever. The Nautic Mixtapes original documentary team, Kirk Thomas and Jeremy Schaulin-Rioux, are still best friends 20 years later. After early years in the film industry, Kirk has forged a career in the corporate world, while Jeremy continues as a director and editor. Jeremy's recent work includes directing the short film Rules for Werewolves, starring Finn Wolfhard, an official selection of TIFF and South by Southwest, as well as editing seasons of Late Bloomer, Run the Burbs, and Don't Even. Kirk and Jeremy's documentary film, Handle with Care, the legend of the Nautic Streetball crew, was an official selection of Hot Docs, Urban World, and VIFF, where it won Audience and Best BC Film Awards. Handle with Care was also nominated for multiple Leos, Directors Guild of Canada, and Canadian Screen Awards, including the Ted Rogers Award for Best Documentary Feature documentary. It has recently been released worldwide by Gravitas Ventures. So today, let's talk about all of it. We'll talk about the Nautic, we'll talk about Streetball, and we'll talk about these two best friends. Kirk Thomas and Jeremy Schaulin-Rioux, welcome to TELUS Originals DocTalks.
Hello, Sabrina.
Okay, we're just going to get into it. Yeah, got my game face on. That's all the game puns I have. So okay. That's it. Okay, so let's start with sports. Do the sportsing. Let's start with your relationship to basketball and streetball in particular. Like, how long has it been part of your life? What do you love about it? Let's start with you, Jeremy.
Actually, I think the basketball started with Kirk because you can't totally tell it based on his Zoom background, but he is tall. And at some point in his early high school career, he got recruited to be a tall man on a basketball court. And then all of a sudden we were like, he's like, I like basketball now. And then I said, I like whatever you like. and then we, sort of started playing basketball, and I kind of, he basically trained me on how to do the things that would help him score, like this is what you do so that I can shoot a jump shot. This is what you do to get me more open. And we just became...
Send pips.
Yes, set a screen for me. Now you dive. I don't pass. So we spent a lot of years kind of just playing tons of pickup basketball all around the city. And I think that's kind of how that's how I fell in love with basketball, is just running around with Kirk to different courts and playing and meeting people.
Yeah. And what about you, Kirk? Like, as Jeremy said, you were recruited because you're tall. So, but was it how quickly did the love or passion for the game follow being recruited in that way?
Yeah, the love of the game hit me instantly, I think. Like, once I started playing, that's all I wanted to do. On my lunch breaks in high school, I just wanted to play basketball. After school, play basketball. Weekends, play basketball. But to touch on your question about streetball, I think both Jeremy and I have always kind of gravitated towards just like flashy, exciting stuff. We used to be into like Jackie Chan movies, and he always had like interesting fight scenes with like really flashy, like flipping a pillow in the air and then punching a guy, stuff like that. And one of my favorite basketball players, you can see a little painting here, is Jason Williams. He used to be like, he had one of the best handles in the NBA, and he kind of influenced me at an early age to like that sort of brand of basketball.
Yeah. So your documentary is not just the story of the Nautic, but also your story as well. I mean, we actually, in the footage that you shot way back when, we even get to glimpse you, in footage from that time. So at the beginning of your journey then with the Nautic, like, who were you? Tell me about those young men who picked up their cameras and film these guys?
Yeah, I mean, we were also pretty into film back then in the end of our high school days. We made a short movie called Coasters for Jeremy's grade 12 film project. And I don't know, we always wanted to do something, whether it be make a movie, make a skate video, or in the end, we ended up making a basketball mixtape. But I don't know, I think we just found a way to combine our love of doing film and basketball. And that's how the Nautic came about.
Yeah. Can we actually, before we, before we go on, I want to hear who Jeremy was. Who were you way back when?
You look maybe a slightly dumber version of the person you see before you in this Zoom screen, StreamYard screen. It's hard to think of how you've changed anything like that. We just we're lucky in the way we grew up, and I think in our families and in each other, there was a feeling of just like follow the things you're interested in and spend the time doing that. And I think waking up in the morning and going like, what am I excited about today? And having a feeling that you were going to get to sort of pursue that was sort of a lucky part of our childhood. So, and I think that's kind of like, that hasn't really changed. That's what's fun about the documentary. It's like a extension of making that stuff. It's like, if we have a camera, we can run around and follow people. We can film ourselves and bring the stuff back into the editing room and find something that we like and trust that that if we're excited about it, that maybe other people will be too. Yeah.
I mean, absolutely. And I got to say, like, so the next question I was going to ask, because this film, even if you're not a sports person, it's appealing because it's human stories, right? Like I was like riveted, like within also it's like, that's when I grew up. So it's like, I was like, oh my gosh, there's a nostalgia factor as well. However, there are some terms I think that we need, or concepts even, that I think we should define, for people. So I'd like to hear, what is a mixtape? What is like a street ball mixtape? And also handle. Because, because it ties really into, it's a great title. There are many meanings in that title, but specific, with regards to basketball and street ball, like what is a mixtape and what is a handle or two handle?
A mixtape, it's just a compilation of highlights set to music. And it were just basically showing the best footage and the best, most interesting way possible, and just back-to-back like hard-hitting highlights, and we tried to like make it look cool by like timing it to music and just packaging it and distributing it.
I do love the because my husband went to film school, worked at a video store, so seeing the tapes being made with the repurposed video store sleeves, I thought that was really great. Okay, so but what about to handle then, or handle in this context? What are we talking about?
It's just, I think it's like slang for ball handling, and it became like, oh, you've got a good handle on the ball. You're a good ball handler. You have handles or a handle, and I feel like at least in the main kind of Nautic era, it was all just about handles. This guy's got handles. This guy's king handles. This guy doesn't have no handles. That kind of stuff. And that, I feel like handles, especially comparing our crew, the Nautic crew and the Vancouver crew, with other street ball teams and crews. Some of those had some really good dunkers. Some of those guys did different kinds of passing and stuff like that. But our guys were all about handles. That was sort of in our world that, there was king handles, and also handles were king.
Yeah. Okay. So you mentioned the Nautic. I mean, the central, force in both, the mixtapes and also in your documentary. Tell me about who the Nautic were, back then, and, what you remember about, your first encounters, like either watching them or talking to them.
Yeah, the Nautic was originally just Jeremy and I filming each other. And if it stayed that way, we probably wouldn't be here today. But we were lucky enough to meet in the early days. I think one of the first guys we met who didn't make the documentary was this guy Stacey Barton, and he just had like a legendary finger roll. He had a lot of clips in the Nautic One mixtape, and then we met Andrew Six Fingers, who's in the documentary. He became a bit of a street ball legend with his like little extra finger there. Yeah, and then we went to Hoop It Up and then met all the main characters like Goosebumps and his crew, and then Joey King Handles and his crew, and then we all became a Nautic crew after that.
So you guys were the Nautic first, and then drew the people to you.
I mean, we were filming each other. That was the beginning of it. I don't think back then there was a name. Like the thing that Kirk and I were making was like, you know, if originally would have been called like Kirk and Jer's basement thing we watch that no one else sees, you know. And it was more like once we discovered this sort of hotbed of talent that I think like a lot of scenes and a lot of like places that talent grows from, those guys all sort of fed on each other, and a lot of them knew each other casually in the city. Partly there wasn't a ton of like visibility for Black youth in the city, so they knew each other just from a perspective of rarity, and people that played basketball that way especially. And then I think once we started filming and the mixtape started coming out, there was just like even from a very basic level of like going on ICQ or MSN Messenger and saying like, we're going to go to this court we're going to go to this court at this time. That sort of developed a little more of a like, okay, we're a specific community, a specific crew, and then that crew became Kirk named the mixtape the Nautic, and that gave it a little bit of like a banner to fly under. But to answer the original question, I just think like we were just really, really excited when we saw that this existed in our backyard, and it's hard to put into words the idea of like if you're an NBA fan, like these guys were the Michael Jordans, as the LeBron Jameses of this stuff in our community, or like you're watching a movie with superheroes, and then all of a sudden you're talking with said superhero, and they're like, you guys want to go? Should we go to McDonald's and get something to eat after this? It's just like a really, really, that's what's fun about a documentary. Like you watch the Nautic, or you watch the Handle with Care documentary, and you're like, wow, he's really not speaking about Kirk and I, but speaking about Joey and John and Rory and all these guys and Goosebumps. That if you meet Joey on the street, you know, he's not an actor. Like that's exactly the person you get to meet. And what's exciting and cool and lovely about him, you'll see it in real life, and you can go watch him play basketball. If you challenge him, he will play you one-on-one. And so it's like, it's really, really fun to get to meet and grow with your heroes, I guess.
Yeah. Kirk, in the intro, I read some words that I had read online about the Nautic, and the words were that they didn't play in the NBA, but they changed the game forever. Can you talk a little bit about, looking back, how the Nautic and how these players changed the game?
Yeah, I mean, Jeremy talked about how our crew and the Nautic mixtape was primarily based around handles, dribbling, flashy dribbling, and there's an element of street ball where you're just trying to put on a show and maybe embarrass a guy using your handles, but there's also those skills also come in handy in an organized pickup game, and I don't know if we had a direct impact on the NBA. Like it's nice to think that. I don't know if that's realistic, but you see that in today's game where you didn't see it before, and it maybe wasn't. It was maybe frowned upon back in the day, but now if you turn on the NBA Finals and then you're going to see Kyrie Irving doing not a lot of the same street ball moves from the mixtape, but I mean he's doing a lot of crazy crossovers in and out, behind the back, stuff like that. So we started focusing on handles when it was maybe not as accepted, and over the past 20 years it's definitely a lot more commonplace and accepted worldwide now.
Yeah. So one of the other things that you capture, besides the the showmanship and just like the sheer like athleticism and skill of of all of these players is also the racism, that was like, in the institutionalized kind of racism of the schools, and the kind of the leagues that we saw. Looking back, were you aware? Because the footage is actually incredible. Like, you see one of the players, doing all this amazing stuff and then being pulled off, and then like the coach is like, losing his mind. Were you aware, like back then, of what you were actually capturing, through that, like the fact that it was like we are watching, like, racism, maybe, more implicit or systemic, and also explicit racism. Like, did you know?
I think no, definitely not. I mean, even going through this documentary, it was kind of eye-opening for me personally. Like back then, we saw these guys doing all these fancy moves on the court. People would come up after them after the game, ask them for their autograph, and love them. And we're like, wow, these guys, life must be perfect and so easy. Like, I personally never even thought about that side of things for them back in the day. But what were you going to say, Jer?
Yeah,
sort of the same thing, I think. Like with that coach, that the specific incident you're talking about, I mean, we were there, we were complaining that he was getting, he was getting shut down in a way that didn't seem fair. But I think we thought of it as, oh, it's because of the way he plays. It's not because of the colors of his skin. And some of that stuff that's in the documentary, and that was also in our producer Ryan City, who made a short with Joey. That's really, really great. And some of that footage is even in the feature documentary, where Joey talks about people labeling the way he plays as rap ball and jungle ball. Like, A, I had never heard that. I don't think we heard that back then. And B, even if I'd heard it, I might not have made the connection. It's just like the something I think about a lot when it comes to the sort of my own personal sort of ignorance about that era, and like well-meaning but not really noticing, is something like I remember riding the bus with Goosebumps once, and this is somebody I think is just like, and when I was growing up, I'd always sit on the back of the bus. Like, that's where you sit when you're cool, And I got on the bus. Me and him were just filming somewhere small, trying to get clips for the mixtape, as we would always be doing. And we get on this city bus, and I'm getting ready, and I feel cool because I'm with Goosebumps, like the coolest member of that whole crew, who are already, not to overuse the word, quite cool. And I'm getting on the bus with Goosebumps. I'm feeling like so cool, and we're gonna go sit. Assuming we're gonna go sit at the back of the bus and like put our book basketballs up and I'll be filming, and then we sit at the very front of the bus, and I just remember like feeling like, oh, I guess this is what's cool, and this is the cool thing to do. And not until years later, hopefully before I'd say we were making this documentary, but just like the memory of it, you start to revisit it and go like, how cool did I think it was to sit around with Goosebumps, and how much of that was because he's different. He was different, and he was black, and that just seemed cool. And that's racism. That's my own kind of unexamined bias. And again, it's like a positive thing. Like, I think the world of this person, but it's still like you don't know that you're othering them in that way, or othering him in that way. And then obviously, like, where you sit on the bus has like obvious historical stuff, but it's also just like, you don't sit at I learned as I got a little older, like, there's way less problems at the front of the bus. You're way less likely to get into an argument or have somebody mouth you off or anything like that. It's just like, there's a big position of privilege being like, oh yeah, I sit in the back of the bus, I'm cool, That's an example of like stuff that I think you look back, and again, like, best intentions. These are my friends. I have like, I'm thinking great things about them the whole time, but I never would have went like, oh wow, that their lives are way different than mine, and challenging in a different way.
Yeah, I mean, and that's what I think is so beautiful too about the fact that you even made this documentary, and also the title is because you're now like going back to that time, with, sitting in a little bit of discomfort, having like some of the blinders off, and doing, the handle with care, with the, an awareness of your privilege, and maybe some regrets about, the way that you did things in the past. And we will get to that, because these are huge things. Before we do though, because, we had Nautic 1, we had Nautic 2, and then there was no Nautic, no Nautic for a while. So in the years since the Nautic 2 was released, how have you looked back at that time in your lives? And I mean this specifically before you started work on this documentary. Like, as the years have passed, Kirk, like, how have you looked back at that time? Like, is it a happy time? Is it, do you have regrets about it? How do you view it, or how did you view it before this project?
Pretty much all positive memories on my side. I mean, it was a really fun project that I got to work on with Jeremy. And I mean, like we said in the intro, after the Nautic, I kind of veered off and went in like the corporate side of things. And I definitely miss being surrounded by like film and stuff like that. So I mainly look back on it with a positive light.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely some things that we messed up on, which we'll probably get into. But overall, it was a really great part of my life, and yeah, positive for me.
Yeah. What about for you, Jeremy? How have you looked back at that time?
Yeah, I mean, I think I feel the same way, that time was really, like, I mean, that's when we were coming of age, right? Like, that was as we were passing from late teens to early adulthood. So that's kind of like really, like, it forms who you are. And personally, I was a little bit excited to make this documentary because I moved to Toronto after film school. And so there's this, at least in Vancouver, people know about the Nautic. They know that that's part of kind of Kirk and I's lives. Whereas in Toronto, nobody knows that. And so people wonder sometimes, like, even in the way I talk or the way I play basketball a little bit, it feels a little, they're like, well, why do you talk that way? Or why do you do that? I'm like, well, when I was 18, this was my whole life. Like, these were the people and the styles and the culture that I was a part of. So it was nice to be able to go, like, see, but I look back and it was such a joyful period, but also it felt unfinished, and it felt like it ended on kind of I wouldn't say a sour note, but it just felt unfinished. And I would see Joey, and we would talk to Mo and some of those guys over the years, and it would always feel like, we kind of not dropped the ball, but this thing was that we're really excited about didn't end in the way we wanted it to. And so it felt, I always felt like a sense of incompletion about it.
Yeah. And had you been in touch with any of the guys over the years?
Yeah, I mean, we filmed with Joey kind of on and off, King Handles, sort of throughout the era between the Nautic 3 ending and this documentary starting. Every couple of years, we would start to go, okay, we're gonna finish it, or we're gonna make a documentary, which was helpful, obviously, when it came to this project, because there was, we were there when his son was born. We were there when he was trying to get drafted to the then D League, but so we talked to him a lot, and I think we talked to John and Dave off and on a lot. Those guys act in a lot of projects and occasionally would work together on some things. Kirk did like some photography with Goosebumps not that many years ago. So we kept in touch, but it wasn't with everyone, and it wasn't nearly to the degree that it is now.
Okay, so let's get more into the meat of the documentary then. What were your aims for this documentary? Like, what story did you set out to tell?
Yeah, I think we wanted to show the world who the Nautic was, and just tell their story as a whole. And like back in the day, there was no like social media or YouTube, so if you weren't at those Hoop It Up games, you didn't buy the mixtape back in the day, you probably never heard of the Nautic, right? So we wanted to share their skills with everybody, but also just dig a bit deeper and maybe look at some of the stuff that we messed up on, and tell some individual stories from each person in the crew, and just let them like share their story as well on a personal level rather than just basketball.
So, and did your aims for the documentary change over the course of filming?
Yeah.
Like, did the story you set out to tell, did it change, once you started picking up the camera?
I think we had went into it feeling like it was going to be really focused on Joey's story, and that it was going to be a big percentage of it was just going to be a celebration of the talent of these guys, I think, and the magic of that time, and a cool time capsule, opening a cool time capsule from the early 2000s in Vancouver. And I think I've said this before, but after the first couple interviews, it became something where like, I was really surprised how charismatic everyone was. Like, as soon as we started talking to every member of the crew, every single one of them, as soon as they started telling their stories, it was really engaging. And even when they were talking about things that weren't basketball, we just found that you wanted to hear their stories and what they had to say. And then as soon as we kind of started talking about the dynamics and the thing falling apart and the racism and everybody's part in the story, people started crying. Everybody started crying. And there was a sense of like, oh, you take a step back. And I think Kirk and I talked about this at some point, and again with our producer Ryan, of like, this movie's kind of just about a family. Like, I think it's like a universal thing. If you zoom back far enough, every reunion story, every story is really just about a family and a fucked up family and kind of the fallout from that. And I think once we started to go like, oh, that's kind of what this is about, the aim shifted, I think, a little bit.
And did it take a lot of convincing to get everybody on board?
I don't think so. No, not at all.
Yeah,
just a few phone calls to every guy, and pretty much everyone was down.
Oh, that's fantastic. What kind of, I mean, because, as you stepped into this project, I mean, you had the weight of, all the things that had kind of gone wrong or sideways, the first time around. You also have more of an awareness of, privilege, and, the impact, that being BIPOC, being marginalized, because we also see poverty in this, as well, can have on people. But now you have that awareness. So like, what kind of responsibility did you feel towards, all of these people, your family, as you call them, that you were filming? And what did you do over the course of filming to ensure, that everybody was, I mean, I'm going to bring up the title of your film, that everybody was, handled with care, and that you fulfilled this responsibility to them?
I mean, we told everybody from the get-go that our goal is to put out the most accurate story of what happened. And we also just wanted everyone to feel comfortable during the interview. So if there's anything that they maybe didn't like with how they said it or what they said afterwards, they would have final say, and we would cut it. We also did a big screening at the end of the movie and showed everyone to make sure they were happy before we showed it to the world, right? Like, it wasn't Jeremy and I saying this is how it's going to be and whether you like it or not, like everyone was kind of involved with that thing. It was just open and lots of communication on that front.
Yeah, and giving people some power as well. Like, that's a total, like, trauma-informed approach. Like, you were doing that even if, you didn't, like, you might not have been like, oh, we are taking a trauma-informed approach. Like, that's exactly what it is, right? Checking in with people, giving them power. What were you going to say, Jeremy?
Yeah, just to piggyback off what Kirk's saying, that, like, on this project, Kirk and I aren't, outside documentary filmmakers or investigative journalists. We were a part of this, and I think we approached it, and everybody kind of knew going in that was the plan. Like, this is a movie we're going to make really with 12, 13 people, and everyone is going to have a say on how they're portrayed. I think we tried to have I wouldn't have known the terms, but try to let everybody know that, okay, like, let's take a break and remember, we're gonna talk about this. You let us know if we're uncomfortable, and make sure everybody had broached the traumatic subjects and the triggering subjects well before the cameras rolled, to make sure that we weren't going to put people on the spot. And again, like, as much as the ending of the original Nautic mixtape era, sort of, there was fallout and there was questions about who did what properly and things like that. I think in the making of those, it was always something we did all together. And I think part of saying that everybody was down to join back up and film this is I hope there was a sense of like, oh yeah, we do this all together. So
Yeah.
you're going to have power over how it looks. And to speak to that screening that Kirk was talking about, where we had all 13 or so guys on Zoom because we were all in different places at that point, was a very nerve-wracking screening for me, at least. Like, it's probably because we're running out of time, and so if everyone's like, we hate this, we want you to change everything. But yeah, I mean, like guys are seeing each other cry for the first time. Some of the guys in the crew are talking about criminal activity and real life challenges that they're trying to overcome or overcoming, or regrets that they have. And most of this stuff hasn't been on film before. So how's everyone going to react to that? And I think it was like, oh man, it was a really powerful, it was one of the more beautiful parts of screening this thing, was like everyone watching it together and supporting each other. And there was so much talk. I mean, I think Kirk and I just kind of took a step back and let those guys talk more, and that so much support, and like, I didn't know you went through that. Oh, I went through that too. Or like, next time I'm here. And it just,
wow.
I mean, ever since we reconvened to kind of make this thing, there's been like a continuous group chat and way more communication with everybody. And that's kind of like, that's the thing that's healed that really tough part of my own childhood. I think it's been really, it's a better part of the movie than the movie doing well, is just kind of everybody feeling like this sense of completion.
And that, that's beautiful. And honestly, you did something that most families don't even do, right? Most families having crisis don't sit around and talk and heal and have grace and forgiveness and stuff. Like, it's absolutely incredible. And, you're in sharing like uncomfortable moments, like the one where you're called out for, what happened with the magazine spread. Like, you're also showing what an apology looks like, what taking responsibility looks like. And impacting, how other people, do that. Other men do that in the future. I think that is just, that was when I was crying. I cried a lot more than I was expecting to when I sat down with this. Can you share like your favorite filming day? And I know any film, there's like, there's pre-production, there's screenings, there's posts and all that. But, when you're actually like, sitting down, with the guys, I'd love to hear each of you talk about like your favorite filming day, on this documentary.
I'll go. We were at my place working on the Nautic 3, and we brought in John to have a little sneak peek at it. And we sat down and showed him the Nautic 3, and then this part didn't actually make the movie, but we showed him a clip of the movie, and it was a part where he was where his brother was being interviewed, and his brother was kind of getting choked up talking about John, and then John got all choked up, and it was intense. He like just like grabbed us both, and like we did a little huddle, and he was like just like saying a prayer. Like, it was a very intense moment, and just something like that was really like heartwarming, and I don't think I'll ever forget. So yeah, that was it for me.
Oh, beautiful. What about for you, Jeremy?
I think it might have been the last shoot day. The last shoot day, we had everybody to, Kirk, correct me if my timeline's wrong. We had everybody together under the bridge where we had shot the first slam shoot with everyone. And that was when we surprised everybody and surprised Jermaine that we're doing another slam shoot, and that he was going to be properly included this time. And then we went straight from that shoot to that kind of like back lot screening session where we screened basically a rough cut of the whole movie with everybody. That was when Joey made speeches. Kirk ended up getting into like a reasonably intense 3-on-3 game with everyone. And that was the moment when everyone came together, I think, for the thing. So that was really, really strong. And that's when you kind of knew that this was going to be something pretty special.
So let's talk about challenges then. And specifically, I want to talk about the challenge of editing, because that's really that is off, like making the choices, like that is your last line of where the story is told, right? What kind of challenges did you face while bringing this film together? And like, how do you decide what to include? Because I'm assuming, I mean, there must be a lot of stuff like what Kirk was describing that didn't make it into the film.
There's a really amazing story that we cut entirely that John and Dave Mubanda would tell in our interviews with them. They're telling the story of their high school coach, Teresa, and how much she impacted their lives in kind of a mirror way that maybe the Nautic did, and really helped expand their horizons. And both of them separately, unasked, launched into these amazing stories, and we went like, this is too, you cut it and you build a little sequence of it and you're like, this is really strong, we can get some footage of it, and it's too much of a sidebar from the main movie, and also the movie's it's probably still too long, so it would have been way too long with that. But the cool part of this story is that we finished the movie, and then John and Dave start going, we want to I think we're going to try and make a movie about our story with Teresa and East Van. And they did. I mean, I think, to plug, I think it's a TELUS project. I think they got funding through TELUS, and they went off and made their own feature. And that just felt so exciting from a perspective of like the Nautic. Like, it's like the story of the actual positive and I think true story of the Nautic crew is like doing something you believe in with your friends and having it turn out and getting positive reinforcement can really impact your life. And it's really empowering to go like, oh, we can do stuff. I mean, but this documentary is possible at least for Kirk and I, because we used to make these mixtapes based on knowing nothing. Like, we made these mixtapes before any of us went to film school or anything like that, because we had a camera and we're like, we could do this. And then it was like, oh, we like the way this turned out. And then a bunch of years later, like, we're sending grant applications and trying to get funding and investors for this movie. And we're like, oh yes, us experienced documentary filmmakers, like, we don't know how to make a documentary. Like, our producer does, but we don't. And you just kind of act as if, and we're just like, it'll turn out, and based on that you have that self-belief of like, if we put everything we have into this, we know the subjects are great, it'll turn out. And I think that was what John and Dave did. They're like, we could also make a documentary, and they went off and made this amazing movie that's touring festivals right now. So that's like not exactly an answer to your question, but that was like such a cool thing to have something that got cut out of the movie grow out in its own way, turn into something really, really lovely.
Yeah, that's legacy, right?
Yeah.
That's right there, That's beautiful. Kirk, I'm gonna ask you this one, because I asked Jeremy last one. Well, what lessons do you think are present in the story, of the Nautic, both like, the mixtapes and, these players, and then the documentary film itself? Like, is there an overarching lesson that you think is present there?
Oh man. There's a couple. I mean, for Jeremy and I, or I'll speak for myself, probably communication. That's something that we maybe lacked back in the day, and got us in some spots that we could have easily not been in. We closed that chapter when we made the documentary, as we learned more about communication. But yeah, just being open and talking about stuff rather than not will solve a lot of problems. And maybe for the guys, it's hard to speak for them, but just believing in yourself and not listening to negativity and I don't know, haters, and just keep going on the path that you think is right. I play with flashy handles and you don't, but that's the way I like playing, and I'm going to keep doing it. So just believing in yourself, and it doesn't matter if not everyone else is doing it.
Yeah. What about for you, Jeremy? What do you see as the lessons that are inherent in this entire story?
Yeah, I think that's kind of it. Like, just kind of believing, trusting what you're doing, believing in yourself, believing in the people around you.
Yeah.
It's just like following what you love, I think is a big theme in the movie.
Yeah, absolutely. So your film has screened at numerous festivals, not just in Vancouver, but, all over the place. Tell me about like the experience of screening, this film outside of Vancouver, and the kind of feedback, that you're hearing. Like, what do people want to know? What are they like? Is there anything in the response at all that's been surprising at all?
Well, Kirk went to New York City with it to Urban World, which is pretty exciting.
Oh, yes. Tell us about that.
Yeah, I mean, aside from VIFF in Vancouver, Urban World in New York was my favorite screening. Joey and I went together, and there's a really famous streetball court in New York called West Fourth, and we got to play there. And yeah, that was one of the highlights of my basketball career, is just playing on that court with Joey and having like there's a huge fence around the court and having all these people surrounding us watching and like oohing and awing at Joey's handles. And I made a few jump shots, so I felt good about myself. But yeah, now we're in New York, which is like the mecca of basketball and streetball period, and showing our movie and just seeing the crowd react to, or the audience, react to the streetball moves and to the story in a positive light was just really reaffirming that we did a good job. And we can hang with like anyone else all over the world who plays basketball,
Yeah. Now, of all the screenings, though, that you've had, both in Vancouver and elsewhere, New York, Toronto, what feedback has been the most meaningful for you?
I think there's been a lot of like people sort of seeing themselves in the story. I think something that was, especially Kirk had notes and had a goal and always of making the movie something that was accessible to people that aren't streetball fans and maybe even aren't basketball fans. And I think having people see it and saying, oh, I watched this with my mom and my mom was crying and my mom saw herself as a in the immigrant story that's present here. Or I think that's always really exciting when something kind of transcends the bubble that it's kind of built in. That's been really nice. There's been a lot of feedback from people in Europe on the total opposite end of the spectrum, that people that knew about the Nautic and loved it back then finally getting to watch this, see the third mixtape in the form that it's in, and see the movie, and guys that were like, oh, I grew up on this changed my life when I was 13 and I'm so excited to get to watch it. That was all really fun.
That's so awesome to hear, and I love that, like, we talk about technology making stuff, so much, easier, but like, and I'm from the age of ICQ and VHS tapes and stuff, but like literally like this with our old technology, like, we did some cool stuff back then too. We could still reach people and stuff. So is the documentary considered, like, do you consider this then the Nautic 3? Like, or is it kind of like no? So
it reveals a lot of the footage from the Nautic 3, and I think it reveals that it exists, but we're going to put out the Nautic 3 proper as a proper mixtape with no crying and all handles, and height,
just handles strictly.
Yeah. Hopefully this summer. I think there's talk of putting it out at like a big party 3-on-3 tournament this August in Vancouver. So hopefully that's gonna be greenlit soon.
Oh, that's fantastic! You heard it here first. I think that would be awesome. I think one of the things that I love most about this story is really the change that like, I as an audience member, saw in you guys, like over the course of, from Nautic 1 to now. And I know, I was in my late teens, early 20s, at the, like in the late 90s, early aughts, and I look back and, I'm like, I was a grown up, but also you have to forgive yourself too, right? Because you're just like just a kid. I still feel like a kid, but like you're really just a kid. So if you could like go back in time though and speak to those, speak to like young Kirk and young Jeremy, at the beginning of filming, when you were filming Nautic 1, like what would you say to them? Any kind of like words of wisdom or advice, to make the intervening years maybe a little easier?
I'll just say, like, in terms of the arc in our story and the documentary, that's always one of the hardest parts of being at the screenings in the theater and watching it. Like, yeah, in some of the early harder parts, we got to kind of like lean lower in our seat, so people are throwing stuff at us, but then at the end it all kind of turns around. But I don't know. Well, what would I tell myself when I was younger? Is just basic, simple stuff, like get the parents' permission. These were all like young, like 16-year-old kids that we were filming, 16, 17-year-old kids. Like,
let's go across the border, guys. Get in the van.
Yeah.
Did not believe they let you guys do that. Wait, and
for the
older teenagers, like you had was it like Rory,
yeah.
10,
I was gonna
11?
He's more like 13, 14. He just looked young.
Yeah, and I was gonna say, for the record, we did talk to his mom, and I spoke with his mom, and we got like a written permission for him specifically, but not for the other guys. But yeah, just basic stuff like that. Ask permission from their parents, and then maybe be more open about. Jeremy and I's goal for the project back then was just to make the best mixtape. We don't care about making money. We don't care about selling merch. We're not trying to turn this into a brand. We just want a mixtape. So if anyone else is interested in anything other than that, then let's bring somebody else in. But if we were more upfront about that, it would have solved prevented a lot of problems.
Communication, right?
Exactly.
Like it's something you have to learn. I get that. What about for you, Jeremy?
There's some haircuts I would give myself a little advice on.
How to forgive yourself.
Go back and just be like, there's going to be pictures of this. It's like, you're going to regret this. Yeah, I don't know. Like, I think, what do you go back and tell yourself, like, it's going to be okay over and over again, right? Like, you just bang on your old window. Hey, man, it's going to be okay. That's probably what I would say. It's not very, like, on topic, but yeah. If I
so important to hear.
Yeah. And it's gonna be okay.
Yeah,
also, it's gonna be moderately shitty sometimes, but
also don't put the audio cord in front of the camera when you're recording.
Yeah. There's some blatant mistakes. A couple song choices.
Yeah.
Gotta forgive yourself. It really is. How did this work then? The two of you, working together. I mean, you said that you've been friends, forever. But the process of like sitting down and working on this documentary, like tell us about your working relationship.
We had kind of come up with again, like very much acting as if, not something we learned from anyone. For doing the interviews, we divvied them up so that wouldn't be. We sort of thought about who had the more interesting questions or had more insight into each guy's interview. And then at the end of the interview, we would switch for the last 20 minutes, which somehow ended up being the best way to go. Cause like I wasn't like a good cop, bad cop situation, but just like I would be sitting, it'd be long interviews, like 3-4 hour interviews. And I'd get to the end of the person that I was focusing on and had done the bulk of the interview. And then Kirk would sit down and be like, come in with all this, all this fire that I had missed. And it just, oh, wow. And sort of change up the tone of the interview. And that really worked to get, we would get so much in that last little 20 minutes when the other person took over that really told the story better. And then other than that, again, we just talk a lot. We try to run everything by each other, try to run everything by the guys, try to run everything by Ryan. The cinematographer on the project is a super duper close friend, Hunter Wood. So like this was made very much by a small family. So I think, you fight about stuff and argue about stuff in a way more organic, no holds barred way that I think mostly served the project well. And I think we were all trying to make the same movie, which is a cliche, but we're all trying to make the same movie. So it you push in the right directions and the best idea wins pretty often.
Yeah. All right, Kirk. Now this is your chance to come in here and do the, good cop, bad cop thing. Yeah. No, but seriously though, how do you describe, your working relationship?
Yeah, I mean, for me, it was this project was a lot of fun. Like I said, I kind of lost touch with the film industry and did I don't know, boring corporate work, but I got to like see what Jeremy's been doing all these years, and just get a taste of, you know, this whole industry. And I mean, Jeremy and I, he lives in Toronto now. I live in Vancouver, but it's not like, it's like I can go a couple weeks without talking to him, or even longer maybe, and we just get together and it's like click right away. You know, it was very, very easy to work together. And I think the biggest thing was what Jeremy said, is just our interview process. We kind of divvied up who had the best rapport with who. Let's go in and do like a 1 hour interview and then just swap at the end, and the other person would maybe catch something that they missed, or just add on to some more interesting topics.
So will this, I mean, you mentioned the Nautic 3. Are we going to see any more Kirk Thomas and Jeremy Schaulin-Rioux film projects, you know, to like collaborations, you know, coming down the line?
I think so.
Can you preview any here? Can you tell us like will it like what would then be a Kirk and Jeremy, you know, project then? Like, would it be documentary? You know, I'm just I mean, honestly, I love what you did. I want to see more. Give me more.
I mean, after we stopped doing the Nautic, there was a stage where I was following around this DJ crew. They would do like DJ battles and stuff like that. So I've got a decent amount of footage from that period. Not as much as we have from the Nautic, but and again, that's like an interesting cast of characters, all very charismatic, and they each kind of got their own story. But there might be something there, and I'd love to maybe talk to them and see if they're interested, and definitely work with Jeremy on it. But I mean, other than that, the Nautic was like years and years and years of filming, and we sat on all this footage, so it's not like we have a whole bunch of those things in our back pocket, you know?
Yeah.
But yeah.
Jeremy, I'm interested because I'm originally from out east. I spent my teen years, actually a lot of the period that we're talking about, you know, in Southern Ontario. And although I wasn't from there originally, but I do remember a lot of ideas when I lived in the Toronto area, you know, about Vancouver, you know, and about like, you know, our sports and stuff here. Like, do you see misconceptions, you know, at all about Vancouver and about our sports scene, you know, in like while you go about your life in Toronto, and, you know, like, and what do you do to correct those misconceptions? What do you say? You say, watch my film.
Yeah. There's definitely like there's always like a, you know, they can't hang in this city or they can't hang in that city. And I think for people that weren't in the know back then, there was a sense of like, oh, there's no street ball in Vancouver. I think even back in the Nautic era, those guys did a lot. The Nautic crew did a lot to sort of dispel that notion. And I think at least in this time, this was still sort of like the preeminent streetball crew in the country. There was some copies and facsimiles in other cities, including Toronto, but I don't think they ever were as good. No, well, fighting words, but
yeah. You're like, yes, offense.
Yeah.
No offense. Yes, offense.
Yeah. So I think like I definitely have a little bit of a feeling of like, oh, here's the movie, here's the crew. We have Nautic gear, obviously, like clothing. And I have a strong feeling of like, if I go play basketball wearing this clothing, which I like to because it makes me feel cool, I have a strong feeling of wanting to be like, I hold the camera, do not judge our crew based on my basketball, you know, acumen. I don't, you know, like, I played with those Nautic guys, and like not so sick. So and just try to feed people to, but Joey comes to Toronto all the time. I mean, everybody sort of knows that stuff. I think that Vancouver has a pretty good basketball reputation in Toronto now, even though like the NBA players are still coming mostly from Ontario. Where are you from?
I'm from Montreal originally.
Okay.
But then I lived at I went to high school in like Markham, Unionville, and then I worked downtown Toronto. So like I remember though, like when I remember the rivalries, and I also, you know, remember the disdain on both sides, you know, from when I first moved to Toronto and then when I moved out here, you know, like, you know, it's the beef, you know, the ongoing beef. But also I do find that like, you know, there are a lot of misconceptions about Vancouver and about our, you know, our sports scene, that like, oh no, you guys aren't this, you're not that. Or like, no, we actually have like some of the most passionate fans and most talented people, in this city, from this city. So I guess I get a little bit in on the beef. I've lived here the longest of anywhere I've lived, I guess. So
there's that clip in the movie from Bobito Garcia, who is like a streetball legend, and he straight out says that flashy handles and then streetball is not just a New York thing. Like there's also a scene in Vancouver. So the fact that we got validated from him is puts the argument to bed, I think.
Yeah, he was great. Well, Jeremy and Kirk, we are coming to the end of our time together today. So for my final question, how would you like people to feel when the end credits are rolling on Handle with Care, the legend of the Nautic Streetball crew? What questions would you like them to ask? What conversations would you like to inspire or overhear? If you're at a screening and you're like eavesdropping in the lobby after or something, what are your wishes?
There's like a classic kind of like skate video. I mean, before there was streetball mixtapes, there was skate mixtapes, skateboard mixtapes, which I think sort of in terms of style and is sort of the blueprint for all this. And the And1 mixtapes, which is where we cribbed a lot of this style from, obviously. But the feeling, the feeling you have when you walk out of one of those movies is, I want to go play basketball. And I think as like a very basic, simple thing, just that feeling of like, and if you don't play basketball, I want to go skateboard, I want to go write, I want to go make a movie. I think that's like the joy of the Nautic crew, and as the kind of flag bearer for it of Joey, I think like seeing him do anything makes you want to go do the thing you love more. I hope we can capture that and pass that on.
That's terrific. Okay, final word to you, Kirk.
Oh man, honestly, I don't know if I have a better answer than that. I think, I hope the movie just inspires people to like go all in on whatever they love, whether it be basketball or, like Jeremy said, writing or any creative aspect,
Yeah, and maybe talk to their friends, talk to your family. Yeah. Talk to your family. Fantastic. Thank you both.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to the TELUS Originals Doc Talks, and to our guests, Kirk Thomas and Jeremy Schaulin-Rioux. Watch TELUS Originals documentaries at TELUS Optik TV Channel 8 and watch.telusoriginals.com, and follow us at TELUS Originals on Instagram. Doc Talks are a production of TELUS Originals. This episode was produced by Sharon Bradley with technical support by Matt Waterworth. Ken Soy is the production executive for TELUS Originals Doc Talks. Doc Talks are produced on the traditional and unceded territory of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh nations. The viewpoints expressed in this podcast do not necessarily reflect those of TELUS.